must be obeyed. I hope you can all see this, see it well. I want to talk to you today, December 2, a Sunday, in 2012, at Fish Lake Sangha in Orlando. I want to talk to you about the nature of happiness, and ask you to think for a moment, what makes you happy? Is it a feeling about something? Is it a state of mind, a state of awareness that makes you happy? Is your happiness dependent on having certain things? Or is it dependent on another person? Or are you happy when your entitlements are honored? And I have to give you a warning here. If you have a long list of entitlements, you will suffer for a long, long time. And we could go on and on with these kinds of questions. And there are absolutely millions of books about happiness available, which tells me that people really don't know what happiness is. So perhaps we have to look at the different spiritual traditions, from Buddhism all the way to North American spirituality. We learn from all of them is that deep, true happiness occurs when we connect to our inner nature. Now that sort of makes sense. Now how do we get there? And here are some tips that I got from different traditions. And this will give us a baseline to begin. The first tip, which is kind of obvious, is to be in harmony with nature's ecosystem. Well, I'm very fortunate at home in Canada. I have this large organic garden at the back of our house and beautiful flower beds in the front. And everything is organic. And for me, it is a total joy to cultivate this in a particular kind of way. So I have a special bush that is a magnet for hummingbirds. I don't have to put up those little feeders anymore. And I have a Scottish thistle from my homeland that is a magnet for bumblebees. And we have little bushes for butterflies. And when I'm gardening, planting, or weeding, I'm watching what's happening in the garden. So if bumblebees are busy, I just kind of back off and I just watch them. And I'm amazed at how busy they are. They're going about the work of pollinating my garden. And everything is organic. I use a kelp as a fertilizer rather than chemicals. And when I do gardening, I slow down. I smile. I have kind of a Pooh Bear hum. And passers-by think I'm an expert gardener. They stop and ask me for tips, and I say, well, I really don't know what I'm doing. I just love the earth. So that harmony with true nature is a way of grounding myself in everyday mindfulness. I'm mindful of every plant, sometimes too mindful. Last year I sort of really took care of 2 tomato plants that kind of grew up unexpectedly. Put the baskets around, I fed them. Halfway through the summer, I realized they were weeds. Very big weeds that had imitated a tomato plant. Very, very clever. So they went into the compost heap, out of which will come more flowers. So being in tune with nature's ecosystem is a no-brainer. Another tip is that we must also be rooted in some kind of cause that is bigger than our individual sense of self. Whether it's a charity, whether it's an organization, we must be rooted in something that's bigger than our ego, bigger than ourself, and also rooted in a sangha for support. It doesn't have to be a Buddhist sangha, it can be a church community, it can even be a football gathering. You have to be rooted, grounded, interconnected with others. And this is to build your inner spiritual strength. That's essential. And we can heed the Buddha's advice about the friends we choose to hang out with. His instructions to Rahula and other novices were very, very clear. He was basically saying, don't hang out with trash and gossip. Choose your friends carefully. And we all know that if we are in the company of wholesome, positive thinking friends, it's a different vibe. When we hang out in bars, something else happens. So the Buddha's advice is choose your friends carefully. Cultivate your relationships carefully. I always add something to carefully. Lightly and beautifully. If your relationships are not a light dance, if they're not beautiful, make them light and beautiful. And we also have to, we all have issues, we all have snags, we all have hurts. We have to learn to think about what bothers us. We have to talk and understand with wise people. Now, if you are in a mess, don't consult with someone who is equally messed up. Because kind of, obvious. But what we do when we're in a mess, we seek complicity with that good friend who will agree with everything we say, who will hate who we hate. That's the worst thing you can do. So talk and understand with wise brothers and sisters who may not have an answer to your issue, but they can return you to breath, in breath, out breath. Return you to doing mindful walking or having a mindful cup of tea so that you calm. And that calm is essential to investigate. And the last part of this trio, we will come back to this trio later on, is to take action to overcome the suffering, to transform the issues that plague us. So these three things, think, talk, act. And with talk, there's understanding. You're not going to talk to gain complicity. You're going to talk with wise friends or teachers so that you can understand deeply the issues that are disturbing you. Now, all of these tips are fine and they're quite obvious, but there is a problem that we have. And that problem is that we create a co-dependent relationship with our suffering. We're all Dharma queens. True? I'm a Dharma queen. Is there anybody here who is not a Dharma queen? Because I won't believe it. At different times, we're all Dharma queens. We exaggerate our situations. And there's a wonderful story from the Buddha about the two arrows. You can be hit by one arrow, and it hits you in the shoulder, and there's terrible pain. And when the second arrow is fired into the same spot, the pain is awful, it's terrible. And the analogy the Buddha was using was the second arrow is you. It's your drama. It's your exaggeration. You've taken the first pain and blown it out of all proportion, so it becomes insufferable and incurable. So when you're getting into your drama queen routine, just remember the two arrows. That jhanas, exaggeration, exaggerates the suffering, blows up the issues so that they're insurmountable, and you don't have the capacity of mind to investigate clearly just what these issues are and how to transform them. So what we have to do with our mind is recognize how we have suffered from abuse of different kind, and what that does, it creates the tendency to have an abusive relationship with our suffering. And that becomes a template in the mind. So the mind starts to recreate all the conditions of suffering. And what we need is that, oh my God moment. Oh my God, this is what I've been doing all my life. How do I stop it? Until we have that moment, we cannot transform anything. And I know this very clearly from dealing with a son who was deeply mired in the drug underworld of Glasgow. Until he got for himself that he did not want to live this way, there was nothing I could do as a parent. And a very scared parent, because he was not just a drug user, he was a drug dealer. And he did get that oh my God moment through practicing mindfully with me for several weeks. And it was quite humorous, some of the things that we did. I taught them, him and his friends, how to do walking meditation. And they wanted to do this in the finest park, private park in Glasgow. And when we did this, they took me there, and the gates were of course locked. They just bounced over the gates, which was not possible for me. So they boosted me up a tree and told me to crawl along a branch. They came over, and they said, okay, now drop. So I dropped, and they caught me. And once we stopped laughing, we did walking meditation for hours in this beautiful park in Glasgow. But these young people had that oh my God moment. How have we been living our lives? Without the oh my God moment, all counsel, all direction, all guidance is useless. The person must feel that. I've been living in such a stupid way. What can I do? That's when the counsel, the guidance, and the support really makes a difference. Those of you who are counselors will know that how difficult it is to persuade a client to change track until they've had that realization that they must do something. They may not know what, but they have to do something. So we need an oh my God moment to get out of the trap of our codependent relationship with our suffering. We tend to romanticize our suffering. It's almost a courtship. We can't give up on it. And that is dangerous. So this oh my God moment, which we will come on to later, is essential. Now, all of these issues that I've just outlined for you, these were addressed in a brilliant way by the Buddha in his first Dharma talk, on the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. The Four Noble Truths. The first Noble Truth is that there is suffering. The second Noble Truth is that there are causes and conditions that created that suffering. The third Noble Truth is that well-being is possible. Suffering can come to an end. And the fourth Noble Truth is that there is a path, there is a way to step out of suffering and into harmony and happiness. This was the first Dharma talk that the Buddha gave. And it concentrates all the commentaries since 2,600 years ago on this talk by the Buddha. I would say 90% of the commentaries emphasize suffering. And I reflect on our times, 21st century. This emphasis on suffering is such a dreary message for the 21st century. Of course there is suffering. Talk to somebody in Syria, or caught in the drug wars in Mexico. Talk to the people who have suffered losing their houses in Hurricane Sandy. Carry it on. Everyday people stuck in traffic, they're suffering. So you say, the Buddha's first noble truth is there is suffering? They say, yeah, right. Tell me something new. Of course there is suffering. For the 21st century, we need a different approach. Because nobody is going to be moved by the notion of there is suffering. Of course there is. Are you dumb or what? Of course there's suffering. I'm suffering. You're suffering. We're all suffering. Let's hear something different. Because let's go back to the interconnected nature of everything. Suffering and happiness are. They're interconnected. We actually need our suffering so that we can take the steps to create happiness and harmony. You don't get a lotus flower without the mud. You need the mud for that lotus flower to grow. So the two are. This beautiful lotus flower, the mud at the bottom of the pond, they are. Suffering and happiness are. So for the 21st century, I'm going to turn the Buddha around a little bit. And I'm sure he doesn't mind. The Buddha trusts the Buddha mind that evolves through time and stays steady. And in the 21st century, I think we need a different kind of message to communicate. Because suffering and happiness are, why not place the emphasis on happiness? That the Buddha's teachings are all about creating happiness and harmony. I think that goes over much better than there is suffering. There's happiness, harmony. It's available. And this is how you do it. Okay? That's the Eightfold Path. So I rearrange the Buddha. We have to see the teachings of the Buddha in the 20th century as skillful means to attain happiness and harmony. I'm sure you can receive that message. Yes, well-being is possible. No matter what you've gone through, well-being is possible, and there are 8 steps to take. The Eightfold Path, so that you can attain it. And some of my Dharma friends have said, well, yeah, you can't really update the Buddha like that. And I said, well, why not? The Buddha doesn't exist only as somebody who walked the earth 2,600 years ago. There is a Buddha mind that constantly evolves and through new eyes finds the way to put into discourse the essence of the Buddha's teachings, but in a way that can be received. The thing that I admire most about the Buddha is his depth of understanding. A close second, it was his ability to communicate to different audiences in different ways so they would understand. So in the 21st century, we need a different communication. So I rearrange the Buddha's Four Noble Truths. I start off with well-being is possible. That was formerly that suffering can cease. Formerly number 3. Make that number 1. Numero uno. Well-being is possible. Harmony is possible. Happiness is possible. You get it? most people say, yeah, okay, I could do with a little bit of happiness. I could do with some harmony, some well-being. And then the second noble truth would be the Eightfold Path. There's an Eightfold Path, which I will go into later, which gives you the precise methods of recognizing, encouraging, and realizing. You'll find out that the Buddha challenges us to work hard in order to get past suffering. So the Eightfold Path comes next. Hey, well-being is possible, and this is the way. You do this, guaranteed, you will step out of suffering. You will experience harmony. Then come on to the dreary message of the past 2,600 years, that suffering is there, and that there are causes and conditions of suffering that we have to investigate. I would put those at the end, that give people some good news, some hope. Because the thing I see in the world at the moment, everywhere, in every quarter, is a lack of confidence and a lack of hope. In so many areas of life, in so many areas of the world. Let's start off the Buddha's basic message, and it's a wonderful message. And I'm not leaving anything out, I'm just rearranging it. Well-being is possible. Harmony is possible. Isn't that a message that the Middle East is waiting for? That harmony is possible? With harmony, this interbeing, non-discrimination. In the Middle East, they would lap that up. Here's how you do it. And the Eightfold Path is a non-denominational path. It comes from the Buddha, but it applies to anybody. That's the brilliance of it. So, 2,600 years ago, let's go back to this first Dharma talk and the Buddha's awakening. He had struggled with asceticism. He thought this was the way to finally liberate his mind and gain freedom. But it darn near killed him. And one time he went to get some water from the river, and he just fell in, he was so weak. And it was a buffalo herder by the name of Sujata who pulled him out and gave him some buffalo milk, fed him rice, started to get him to eat properly. And he lived. And he realized that he was harming his body. He tried to suppress his mind and suppress his body, and it almost killed him. So he saw that there was a middle way between asceticism and ahimsa, doing no harm. Not just not doing harm to animals, people, plants, and so on, but don't do harm to yourself. So he got that, and that was the middle way. And he also got the idea of the Four Noble Truths as a recipe for understanding, and the Eightfold Path as a method of putting that understanding into action. So when he sat under the Bodhi tree for a very long time, he finally awakened. And he had all these incredible insights. But he didn't get up and shout into the village, "Hey folks, I know the news. I'm going to give it to you." He sat there for 40 days, and the villagers would come and they would give him food. He just sat there for 40 days, putting his insights into the appropriate vessels so he could communicate. Very carefully did he do this. And he wanted to share the fruits of his awakening with the 5 ascetics that he had practiced with. And he heard that they were at Deer Park in Sarnath, So he walked from Bodh Gaya all the way to Sarnath. I think it took him about 2 weeks. And he was singing. The Noble Truths. The Eightfold Path. And what I think was going on in the Buddha's mind, because all the Buddha's teachings in his 45-year ministry come back to this single talk. Once a year, I always pick up this talk, go back to the original translations. And I'm getting more and more of a sense of how vast this teaching is. It is so vast, it's almost incomprehensible, especially when all his other teachings refer back. It's as though he had this 45-year-old plan, and all the seeds of those 45 years are planted in this first Dharma talk. That is awesome. Boggles my mind. But here comes the challenge of the Buddha. We can all get the Four Noble Truths, whether it's rearranged for the 21st century or in its original form. We can all get the Four Noble Truths. But the Buddha does something with those Four Noble Truths. The 12 turnings of the Dharma Wheel. His talk is called the Great Turning of the Dharma Wheel. And he's saying that with each Noble Truth, there are 3 turnings of the wheel. The first turning, let's take the first Noble Truth. We'll stick with the original form, that there is suffering. The first turning is to recognize that this is suffering. We recognize that there's something wrong. There's really something wrong. It's bugging us. It's making our relationships impossible and hard. And the first stage, recognition, is you get out of denial. You know how when you're suffering and somebody comes up to you and says, well, how are you? I'm fine. Freaked out, insecure, neurotic, and elsewhere. We're not fine at all. I remember a number of years ago when I was going through some very, very difficult things, one of my colleagues, who I thought was a really good friend, came up to me and said, well, how are you, Ian? So I told him I was a mess. You know, he didn't want to hear. I've never seen anyone back off so fast. So I realized, if you're going to talk about your suffering and try to get some kind of understanding, do it with someone who's steady. He was probably in as big a mess as I was, but he backed off pretty fast. So the first turning of the wheel, this is suffering. This is why I'm feeling so bad. It's like the first step out of denial, because we deny our suffering all the time. The second one is encouragement. I must understand this. I must understand suffering. I must understand that I have to do something about it. And that's the third step, realization. This is action. You take the action to get out of suffering. And in this first thing, this first noble truth, you stop running. You stop running from your pain. You stop running from blaming everybody else. You're stopping. And you're taking a look at, yes, this is suffering, and I'm going to investigate it. That's work, people. This is work. And this is the Buddha's challenge. And in most talks about the first Dharma talk, somehow the most incredible part of this teaching is left out, the work. It's like, you know, if you're training in a gym, like Franklin does, work it, work it, work it. Isn't that what you say to your appliance? Yeah, you've got to work it. And with each Dharma, each of the Noble Truths, there's 3 turnings of the wheel. With each one of the 8 components of the Eightfold Path, there's 3 turnings of the wheel. This is where the teaching goes fast. We can get hold of the 4 Noble Truths. Then we come on to the 12 turnings of the wheel. It's like a bases-loaded home run that's right out of the park. The Buddha would have been a fantastic baseball player because intellectually, he's got it. So they're the 3 turnings of the wheel. It's like think, talk and understand, act. Okay? And we all know with our suffering, these are important, that we have to think about it, get out of denial. We have to encourage ourselves. And this is where the support of your Sangha and your teacher is so, so important. To encourage you to look deeply. You don't do it on your own. You need that steady Dharma brother, that steady sister, that teacher that you really trust, who will be with you, who will sit with you while you do the investigation. They're not going to do it for you. They will listen deeply and create a space for you to do it for yourself. Then you own it. And the realization stage of action is you stop running away. And you can stop that just with in-breath, out-breath, being present here and now. You've stopped running away. Then we come to the second noble truth, that there are causes and conditions that have created suffering. Again, recognition, encouragement, and realization. We recognize that we have been following a path in our life that has made us unhappy, that has made other people unhappy. So the Buddha calls this an ignoble way. I would call it screw-ups. We have just screwed up on how we speak and how we relate. Think. Encourage. Now I'm going to really understand this. I'm going to investigate the nutriments that have been feeding my unhappiness. Shariputra, one of the Buddha's most intelligent disciples, talked about the 4 nutriments. And he started it off by saying, nothing survives without food. So if we identify the nutriments we've been taking in, is edible food, is sense impression food, food of volition, and consciousness. All of this is food. And some of it is really bad grub. We don't want to consume it. So we identify the nutriments that are harmful to our well-being. The action stage of realization, we stop feeding our demons. Because we've identified the harmful nutriments that make us unhappy, that cause us to suffer and causes other people to suffer. Look at the work involved here. We recognize our screw-ups, that we've been following a path that has created the conditions and causes of suffering in our life. We know we must understand the teachings on nutriments. You see how from this turning of the wheel, the teachings on nutriments evolves out of it. The teachings on consciousness evolves out of it. This is where I just get awestruck by the Buddha. In this point here, he's anticipated the teachings on the 4 nutriments. He's anticipated the teachings on consciousness. Awesome. Now the third noble truth, one that I would put forward first, but you know that. The third noble truth is that well-being is possible. So we start the 3 turnings of the wheel. We recognize that well-being is possible. I do not have to be trapped in this suffering. Well-being is possible. And I'm going to understand it. I can understand that harmony, happiness, love, wholesome relationships, all of this is possible. Realization is action. I'm going to take the action to get beyond all the harmful patterns that are trapped me. It's work again. Then we come on to the 4th noble truth. This is the way out of suffering. And it is the Eightfold Path. And in the Eightfold Path, the Buddha lays out a clear roadmap of how to conduct ourselves in every aspect of life. There's not time to go into that in any great detail today, but I will just touch the first thing in the Noble Eightfold Path, which is right view. Right view is the key to it, but I will come on to that in a moment. But let's look at the 4th Noble Truth. Again, 3 turnings of the wheel. This 4th Noble Truth, the way out of suffering, is also the way to happiness, and it's the Eightfold Path. We have to recognize that, okay, there's a path that leads to well-being, but I really don't know too much about it at the moment. We encourage ourselves to live that path. So we need guidance, we need support, we need company on that path, so that we're walking this path, holding the hands of our brothers and sisters. Then realization, action. I'm living this path to the best of my ability. Okay? And this Eightfold Path is particularly pertinent to the good friends who are taking the 5 Mindfulness Trainings transmission next Sunday, and I hope you will all come to that. That transmission is putting your commitment out there. I am going to live by the Eightfold Path to the best of my ability. The trainings. You are going to fall off the wagon, but you just pick yourself up with your friends and carry on. So the realization, yes, I'm living a committed life to the Bodhisattva path. I'm keeping the 5 mindfulness trainings, which are based on the Eightfold Path. Now you see, with these 12 turnings of the wheel, the Buddha's challenge is, are you going to work? Are you actually going to do the work to make this alive? And you also apply 3 turnings of the wheel to every one of the components of the Eightfold Path. So this is a heavy workload. And the only thing that makes it kind of light and beautiful is your Sangha. Every time you breathe in and breathe out with the Sangha. Every time you do walking meditation with the Sangha. Every time you chant along, as we did this morning with the Om So Hum. It becomes light and beautiful. But the roadmap is clear. There couldn't be anything clearer than the Eightfold Path. But there's work to do. And I've been reading a lot of commentaries on the first Dharma talk. They skip over the 12 turnings of the wheel. And I think, come on guys. What were you doing in the 7th century? The 15th century, the 18th century, the 19th century, the 21st century? What are you doing? You've missed it. The Buddha is challenging us in a very specific way to get it done. And he's specific about guidelines. Really, really specific. Now, I just want to come on to the Noble Eightfold Path by focusing first of all on right view. And hopefully your teacher, Bob, can pick up the other 7 in the course of your practice together. The key to the Noble Eightfold Path is right view. Right view really means insight. We all have views based on our upbringing, our colleagues, and so on. And most of our views are wrong. They're full of prejudice and discrimination. And it's only when our views become insights that we have something different. And the whole point of right view is to turn the wheel 3 times. And here we go back to Shariputra. He was a brilliant disciple of the Buddha. And he was saying about right view, first of all, recognize the nutriments that are harmful. Encourage the nutriments in your mind that are wholesome. And you taste the fruits of that practice by suddenly recognizing, or realizing rather, that your views have become insights. You've just been through a presidential election in the United States. Very few insights, lots of views. And lots of toxic communications. With right view, you've got something different. Because you're drawing on the development of 3 energies: mindfulness, concentration, and insight. These are the 3 energies to always cultivate in Buddhism. They're the energies of transformation. And it works that mindfulness and concentration creates insight. If you're practicing mindfulness and you're using concentrations like walking meditation, the sutra and the full awareness of breathing, then insights emerge, replacing your views. It does something much deeper. It replaces your wrong perceptions. Because you know, you can have the best intentions in the world. But if you have wrong perceptions, your good intentions are fed through wrong perceptions, you will inevitably create disaster. Because you're ignorant of reality as it is. So when you have right view based on insight, it makes all the other 7 components of the Eightfold Path full. It fills them up. Without right view, they're always going to be depleted. So right view is crucial. And I want to bring a modern sutra to your attention, which deals with good intentions, wrong perceptions, and disaster. And had there been right view, it could have been avoided. This is a modern sutra written in the Westgate Mall in an Ottawa suburb this summer. It's a sutra on the Hawaiian good luck sign, or as it's known in Canada, the Middle Finger Sutra. And as it's new and fresh, I'm going to make sure I don't avoid any of the essential steps in this new sutra. This teaching by the Wise One was passed on to a lady in a bookstore. And here are the lady's words. The other day, I went into the local religious bookstore, and I'm a devout Buddhist. I really love the Buddha. But I saw right in front of me a honk if you love Jesus bumper sticker. And I had to have it. Because if I put this honk if you love Jesus bumper sticker on my car, this would be my contribution to global religious harmony. And everyone could honk. Christians, Buddhists, Muslims, Hindus, Native Americans, what have you. They could all honk if they love Jesus. So I bought it. And I put it on the back bumper of my car. And I'm really glad I did that. Because it brought out the most wonderful response from all kinds of people, from many faiths and cultures. It was so uplifting for me to be bringing this item of global religious harmony into manifestation. There I was, stopped at the light at a busy intersection, just thinking about how my project for global religious harmony would help other faiths and traditions. I didn't notice that the light had changed, and it had gone to green. But that bumper sticker really worked. I found lots of people who really loved Jesus. The guy behind me started to honk like crazy. He must have really loved his Lord, because pretty soon he leaned out of his window and he yelled, "Jesus Christ!" So loud. And it was just like a football game. He was shouting, "Go, Jesus Christ, go!" He was encouraging all the fans of Christianity to move forward into the new light of global religious harmony. Everyone else started honking too. So I leaned out of my window, waved and smiled to all those lovely people. There must have been a guy from Florida back there, because I heard him yelling about a sunny beach. And I saw him waving in a funny way with his little finger stuck up in the air. So I asked my two kids in the back seat, what did that finger mean? And they giggled and they said, "Mom, it's the Hawaiian good luck sign." So I leaned out of the window and I gave these people the Hawaiian good luck sign back. I waved it to them. Now several cars behind me, a very nice large man. He should go on a diet, but he was very nice. He stepped out of his car and yelled something I couldn't really hear. It sounded something like "Mother Trucker." I think he was from Florida too. Now he must really love the Lord the way he was waving his middle finger. And a couple of people were so caught up in the joy of the moment, they got out of their cars and other people got out of their cars and they all came walking towards me. I bet they all wanted to meditate with me on global religious harmony. But then the light changed to yellow and I stepped on the gas quickly and I was the only one to get across the intersection. Everyone was meditating and waving their middle fingers in the air. So I leaned out of the window and gave them a big happy smile and a Hawaiian good luck sign. And I drove away. Oh, praise the heavens and the Buddhas in all the 10 directions for all these lovely meditators. The followers of the Wise One immediately put the Middle Finger Sutra into practice at every intersection in the city.